Yes, just like you said, the history probably will repeat, just in different time and different locations. Last couple of days, I watching TV about this Kabul, Afghanistan, the evacuations, and lots of people. I hope everybody can get out of there, but there's some people I think they cannot get out. They probably just have to hiding, and maybe people was associated with American and helping American do some work, but they're not able to escape. So they right now they probably hiding, and some people just desperately, basically, in danger, waiting for their sentence. So that reminds me something. Not just 1975, the Saigon War. Also remind me long time ago, my uncle Charlie's story. Uh, Charlie, my uncle Charlie, when 1943, he just a senior high school student in a missionary school. And then after Japanese occupied Shanghai, so the whole school led by American priests, and they moved to Kunming, is inside of China, and to continuing the education. So that place, Kunming, also is the country that the camp I went, the re-education I laid down. And so that time, American Air Force and the Flying Tiger was there and fighting a Japanese, also training a Chinese Air Force and the base there. So they desperately need a lot of interpret. So the priest, American priest, asking my uncle Charlie, he said that you want to be a volunteer, you are senior high, and you speak perfect Chinese and English, so maybe you can be an interpreter. So he agreed, and to fighting with the Japanese, right? Of course, he agreed. So he just jumped in on the job, and by the time he still is a part-time interpreter. Then a year later, he turned 18, so they hired him as a full-time job as an interpreter. And then he was very proud of himself and to working with Flying Tiger. But that was 1944. So 1945, when Japanese surrendered, so the mission accomplished. So Flying Tiger go home. And also that missionary school also went back to Shanghai. And then my uncle Charlie, and he met a girl in the nightclub. She is a beautiful dancing girl. Dancing girl means they were, you would say, they also call taxi girl, like you pay for the hour to, they dance with you in the nightclub. So he fall in love with that girl. And normally those girls are very beautiful, but they're from very poor family. That's the only place they can make money and to support the family in Shanghai in that time. So she found Charlie, and Charlie was young and handsome, and also my grandparents give him a lot of money and properties. And so she's very happy, very grateful and married him. And so they got married, and at that time Charlie lived in the Shanghai, like a whole load of houses called Alien. And they probably 15 houses my grandma gave it to him. So he lived one and then rent out all others. So they're doing very well. And after a few years, they have 2 kids, another on the way in 1948. And 3 years later, after Japanese surrender. But that time, his friend and all the people, his schoolmate from that missionary school, they all prepare and to leave because they know communist, party is coming and they're going to occupy. And so they are planning to escape. And so they asked Charlie to go with them. because some of his friends, they're already becoming the nationalist, their Air Force or Army officers. So they had to leave. And some, and they also work for the national government. They had to leave too. And so kind of big evacuation. So they asked Charlie to go, say that because you're not safe here, because you work for American Air Force, the Flying Tiger. So sooner or later, they will get you. You better leave to Taiwan. And he said, no, I'm not single man anymore. I have a family. I just have a 2 sons and another one on the way. So I just cannot leave. Also, I have this other properties, and I cannot take with me. So what I'm going to do in Taiwan, I had to think about how to make a living and to feed the whole family. And so he rejected. So they all left in 1949, and they occupied Shanghai. The communists take over. And he stayed, but he think that time he still think maybe he still can business as usual, and he was a stockbroker, and he think everything will be same, but not too long, and the stock exchange closed immediately, and then the Korea War happened. So that time, the Communist Party asked everybody, and were used to work for American, associate with the American government or the Army or Air Force or whatever, you had to register. And if you don't, somebody report you, and you immediately go to jail. And so he went to register. But then he think, I'm just introvert. I didn't do anything. I'm not a real army personnel, or I'm not a real government person. So I'm fine. I didn't do anything. I just translated. Right? Anyway, so he registered, and then probably 6 months later, they arrested him and put him in jail. And they accused him as a traitor, and also is the spy, because you speak English and you were associated with American.
Hey, Amy,
So,
do you know why they waited 6 months?
I don't know. I don't know why they waited 6 months, but that's about the timeline. And they were, I think they have a lot of people, so just go from top to down, so category and what people are supposed to arrest. And so get his turn, so they arrest him, put him in jail, and there's no trial or anything. They just want him to confess how do you do the spy, how you become a traitor, and kind of things, But there's nothing to talk about. He just interpreted, right? So anyway, that happened, and so that time also they took, because he's a traitor, they accused him as a traitor, but they sentenced him to 10 years and sent him to some labor camp. And the family, meanwhile, was no support anymore, because they took all his property, because once you're a traitor, they accuse you as a traitor, and so they took away all your personal property. So all his houses are gone. And when he got home, he was released early. The reason is he was very sick. He got a TB. He almost died. Very, very sick. So they kicked him out because they don't want him to infect the other people there. And he got home. I think it's probably 2 years later he got home. And he saw his family, and they've been kicked out of the house, and they confiscate all the properties. They were living in the one used to be doorman's reception room, just in the reception of mails and stuff like that. But the whole family is no kitchen facilities, no bathroom facility. They had to go to public bathroom. And so it was very, very awful condition they live. And also he's still sick, in the TB. So that time, and they have some kind of movement and they want the Shanghai people live in Shanghai. If you don't have a job, they want you to go to northwest part of China, and they have some coal mines. They say they're going to provide you a job. So his wife said, "Well, you are sick, and I'm afraid that the 3 kids were infected, and also we need food." So they have this job offer in the northwest China, the coal mine, very primitive condition, but I gotta go because for the kids. So I agree with. And so that time my grandma is still alive, so he moved back, live with the grandma, and then his wife took 3 kids to the northwest, the coal mine, to stay and working there. And then eventually, because he has a schoolmate, it's also from that missionary school, and he went to Zhejiang University Medical School, and so he became a doctor. He didn't escape to Taiwan. He's still in Shanghai. So that his schoolmate was saving his life. So he just gave him some medicine. And at that time, American or British already become a #1 enemy in China, after, during the Korea War and after Korea War. So, but they still can, through Hong Kong, they can get some import medicine. Those doctors, they have their own friends, the relatives in Hong Kong. They will send them something. You're still able to receive some imported some medicine. So he gave some medicine and treated TB. So eventually he was cured and he didn't die. And then talk about his family. His wife was a very beautiful woman, and with 3 boys, and got the northwest, the coal mine. Over there was so bad. He didn't know. He's a dancing girl. He didn't know how to do any harsh labor. So he said, asked them, and said, "If you have anything else, I can do it." So they offer her a job as a cook. And so she is cooking in the coal mine, but it's still very harsh. But for her kids, and they just barely have enough food. So that time, in charge of the coal mine is a communist officer, and then this officer's family is in the countryside, not in the coal mine, and so he just offer her. He said that you can be my not wife, of course. He said like a mistress, and I give you extra food to feed your 3 boys. And she just cannot is no other way to make a living there, and for the kids. So she agreed with them. So that's what she able to manage it to raise the 3 kids. So after lots of years, I think, but before or after the Cultural Revolution even, but during the Cultural Revolution, because she was still in that coal mine with kids, and also she was a lover of this communist officer, so they were basically protected and didn't get any bad treatments. And but Charlie and my grandma dead, but Charlie was living in basically the poverty, and he still, I think, it's not really cured the TB. He's still not very healthy, and he is weak. He cannot go do any physical labor work, so he couldn't find any decent job. So he still just did something here, there. It's like a beggar basically. And sometimes, lots of times, he just coming to my house. My mother just feed him, and basically, it's a very sad situation. But Red Guard didn't go after him because you're already down and out. They don't want to be the dead horse, so he didn't get anything. They know he cannot do anything, and also he was living in poverty, so they didn't go after him. So that's the situation. And he was, and then finally, I think after Cultural Revolution, and his wife and 3 kids all grow up, and they all back to the wife already retired, back to Shanghai, and so they live together, but they're still in the one room, very bad condition. And then until 1980, my aunt from America, her husband also reverend or something. So Charlie asked that did they know that the priest, the American priest, he already went back to America. Finally, they found him, and actually in Bay Area, Hayward, not too far away. And because the priest is very old, but his son still in charge of that congregations. So they wanted to help in Charlie. Charlie is coming to visit him. So they told him he can apply for a political asylum and to Taiwan, but not in America. And but he said that, it's been that long, that many years, he said that my family is still there, my son, my wife still there. He said that doesn't matter what happens, it's over, Whatever I treat miserably, I had a miserable life because I work for American Flying Tiger is interpreter. So that's the story. I was thinking about this in Kabul, and I just thinking about lots of people that work with Americans. It's like a history is a repeat.
It's a history repeating of working as an interpreter to help the United States, and you end up in a bad situation.
Whole life, So I don't know what had followed up, And for those people right now, I just honestly I remember that Uncle Charlie's story.